If you go to China, they have fundamentally changed how a car is made. They're building it more like a product. And if you're a phone manufacturer, the phone and the car is the same thing.
Jae Park, welcome to Design Better.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Jae, you're doing really interesting work, and you have been doing some fascinating work throughout your career. But where you are right now, you're at Ford.
Yes.
You're working specifically on electric vehicles, so F-150, Mach-E, all of those different vehicles as well.
Including other propulsions too, by the way. So all propulsion.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah.
Fantastic.
Which makes it really fascinating and complicated.
Yes, yeah. We want to talk about all of that stuff, but maybe we could just talk a little bit about your experience in general, because you have a unique perspective that you spent such a long period of time working at Microsoft and Amazon, working on the Echo Show, which is a ubiquitous product. Spent a couple years working at Google in a very important leadership role. And now you're at Ford, and all of these companies they're some of the most influential companies in the world. How are problems solved differently across these different companies and cultures? Because culturally, people are going to look at things differently. Between Microsoft, Amazon, Google, and now Ford, what's the difference between the problem-solving approach?
So there are a few ways to cut this, but to get to the answer first, I think with the exception of Amazon, Microsoft was software, although the fun part was we did with the partners on what the hardware should be. I mean, that's the whole PC industry, and then you see that played out on the Windows Phone, for example. At I think Amazon, we had first row seat at defining the hardware in-house while trying to connect the software to enable the service. So it was, I think, the first kind of company that was trying to bridge all that together. You hear about Apple doing really well on services now through their software and hardware. So having a first row seat to that was very enlightening. Google was definitely more software. We had some hardware components for meeting speakers and stuff like that, but we primarily stayed at billions of users. And how does that impact? Even a 0.5% negative impact there's millions of people. So it's a different kind of experience working at Ford. It's primarily a body company, right? You're building physical bodies. And then the big shift is adding the mind. So it's maybe not the most appropriate word, but the idea of having service. So having these three things connect is sort of where most products are going.
Talk maybe a little bit about the sort of Ford's design legacy. I mean, certainly the cars themselves have, an aesthetic design legacy, but in more modern years, IDEO's worked with Ford in the 1990s. We talked to Sandy Furshee, who ran their innovation lab for a while. So this idea of design and innovation it's not new to Ford, and it's something they seem to invest in quite a bit. Could you talk to us about that?
Yeah, I think the shift is, I think there's a lot of great movement in design, of course, in Ford. I think Ford is trying to find its footing on what it is to be a product company from a manufacturing company. And you start with the body again, aesthetics. And then at some point, you have to start doing product design. And you have to know what are the big bets and what do the customers want. So I think all of the human-centered investment that went in was very helpful. I think at some point, though, it also made sense that, hey, you need to have experts who can work side by side with engineering to actually build something. So that takes a different kind of expertise. So I think the last 2.5 years, almost 3 years I've been here, what I've been tasked to do is make digital product design appear to the physical design. And typically in OEMs, digital team is under a studio. In fact, in our company, my team used to be called Digital Asset Delivery Team. Very production heavy, service oriented. And so part of my charter was to come in and build out that team of experts. And we like to call it as expert leading experts model. And then so you work inside out rather than outside in. So that's been the biggest shift in how we work.
Tell us more about that, just the integration of software into cars. I mean, there are some car companies where that is so inherent in their their philosophy and
Yeah.
their strategy, really.
Yeah.
And that Ford is an expert in making cars. They are the ones who innovated the production process, but integrating in a legacy company like this that's been around for so long, integrating new technology in some sense it's a challenge, like it's a challenge to try to bring that into the entire experience.
Yes.
How do you think about that, and how does the leadership at Ford think about that integration?
In auto industry, when I arrived, there was 3 big disruptions. People like to think about electrification, which is a big one. It's the adoption rate has slowed down, but it's going to be the end state for most of the customers, we believe still. Then there is autonomous driving, different levels of it. And then there's digitization, which is a broad term, but that's really important because that's the bridge to the interface. And then, we talk about binding that to service, but now thinking about AI more holistically is becoming that next big thing that has to bind all of these together. So for Ford, even before I got here, they went through a huge disruption to adopt touch interface a while back. And those are some of our existing vehicles. It runs on a software called Sync 4. And, it's kind of, to be honest, dated, but that was a huge shift for Ford, right? To take that risk, many years ago. And now we are starting to invest a lot more in embedded experiences. So last year we shipped 5 programs that uses Google's AAOS, including their services. And we have a good tailwind on those products this year. And we're working through the next 2 generations of products where we invest even more on our embedded experiences. So it's early days, but we're definitely investing there quite a bit.
So should we read this as the strategy of let's shift the responsibility of software over to our phones instead of the car? Is Ford's strategy that we need to bring more of that in-house?
For example, if you go to China, they have fundamentally changed how a car is made. They sort of jumped over a couple of generations and went straight to using EV vehicle as a kind of a clean canvas. They're building it more like a product. And if you're a phone manufacturer, the phone and the car is the same thing. It just simply blends. So they're ahead in some ways on the customer experience. And we have different opportunities and some headwinds. We don't own the phone OSs. So, but we do think there's definitely a big theme around how does phone and the vehicle interact together. And it doesn't always have to be that it's the same OS, but like imagine, your phone when you're away from the car, you can still have your car in your pocket. And there's quite a bit of work you can do to make that experience really great. And you've seen some of other manufacturers do this, especially EV companies, but that's just the beginning of surfaces that we can bring a lot of cool experiences.
Design Better is supported by Saoli. I love to travel, but what I don't like is the hassle of figuring out my cell phone situation when I'm abroad. In the past, I've gone to a kiosk at my destination airport to get a SIM, but who wants to wait in a line after an international flight? Plus, those things always seem a little sketch to me. How much is this going to cost me? Saoli makes all this super easy. You can download their app on your phone, and you can buy an eSIM before you fly, so you're connected the minute that you land. And if you're traveling between countries, you only need one eSIM. You can get a global or a regional plan and travel with the same eSIM plan. You'll save money significantly with an eSIM over your carrier's roaming plans, which gets super pricey quickly. Activate Saoli's security features and browse more confidently. You can change your virtual location, block ads, and stay safer with web protection. All Saoli eSIM plans are compatible for iOS and Android devices. If you travel internationally, this is what you'll need to stay connected without spending a fortune. Download the Saoli app in your app store. Search for Saoli, S-A-I-L-Y. Use code DESIGNBETTER at checkout, and you'll save 15% off your first purchase. Or go to Saily.com/design better. That's SAILY.com/design better.
Tell us a little bit more about Aaron and I think we're in the same boat, not having experienced EVs in China. So when you say the car and the phone are the same thing, they essentially have control over the design of both these systems so they can integrate them better?
Yes. So like Xiaomi and Huawei, they are phone manufacturer. And we can talk about that too. There's a book that you all should read if you haven't. It's called Apple in China. And it talks about tech transfer. And they also mentioned Tesla there as well. So what we've done is created a knowledge base for the Chinese to pick up how to build complicated, sophisticated products. And they've used that as a flywheel to create their own. So they are a number of steps ahead of what most people don't even know is happening. Like Huawei has a foldable phone. That thing's pretty amazing. I think there's a video of Jensen Huang out there like playing with it and going, oh my gosh, this thing is crazy. Like I haven't even seen anything like this. So not only are they good at manufacturing at cost, but they're also being creative. And they took more of a first principles approach. They built the ED more like a product, right? Versus having to deal with, oh my gosh, I have to manage all these, modules. We ventured them out. We have to spec them. 2 years, it takes a year and a half to get all those parts back so we integrate and ship. They don't think that way. They can have a very clean architecture, build it almost like a computer on wheels. There's a couple of layers that is a little bit more complicated than a phone. Like, you need to have a driving powertrain, manage the power, all that stuff. But fundamentally, it works like a phone on wheels. I mean, it's pretty magical. And it really will blow you away in their approach to what a car is. And I think there's quite a bit of opportunity for Ford and how we reimagine that as well.
That's fascinating. I mean, this is ultimately what Apple, they dealt with before the iPhone. They experimented with, creating software for someone else's device, bumped into a lot of limitations and decided it's inevitable. We have to have full vertical integration where we're controlling all of those things.
And we can talk later about how for US and the West, having displaced how you manufacture is a disadvantage.
Yeah, distributed. Yeah, talk more about that. Like say more about what the disadvantage is. I mean, Ford has all of the manufacturing and is making some pretty incredible changes in, expanding and modernizing the manufacturing process in the U.S.
Absolutely. So we're, as you can tell, like we have majority of our vehicles that are manufactured here. So that's a great thing. I would say the Achilles heel is supply chain, like the ingredients. And name a big tech company that's creating modern devices, glasses, speakers, name them. And then if you listen to Mary Meeker, the person, she forecasts the future a lot. In the last AI report, she mentioned we're going to have trajectories like billions of smart, intelligent devices. Most of them are going to be manufactured in China, especially the supply chain, right, of ingredients. I think that's a disadvantage as we think about how you compete when there's a shift of going from sort of a globalistic distribution of supply and building things to more regional. And I think that's going to create tensions. And I think that's happening naturally because as products get smarter, the moment you have cameras and you have sovereign cloud processing it, you're going to have issues, whether it's a car or a small device, especially if another country is trying to sell that into, let's say, the US. And you're seeing some of that play out already. So I think those are the challenges you have. I believe in this new era of AI, the way we have to think about the new opportunities is how the digital experience live on a specific vessel, whether it's digital or physical, because the input method drives the new paradigms. And right now, there's a bit of a displacement of the input method that we're applying. We're using the old ones, but the capability of the thing we're trying to leverage, the AI, is completely different, right? So you want to have total control over everything you build, And you can't just be responsible for the digital portion and say you're okay. You're not okay, because if you think about what a modern industrial core is there's two factories that's happening, that's being built. One is the AI factory. We're aware of that one because there's a lot of press on that. I think we're over-indexed on that. The other one is just, intelligent product factories, things that can build intelligent products, including cars. That one's really important because that's where you're going to get a lot of parts, compute, sensors, other supplies that comes together, whether it's an EV or a robot. It's the same kind of architecture in a way. You want to get really fit at that so that you can bring the cost down and have ownership of the supply, right? Especially when we go regional from global. And then it's power. What's going to power those factories? And I mentioned the supply chain already. So that's how I see it. The two big factories, energy, power, and supply chain. And if you look at US right now, you're starting to hear news about, this company is now investing in bringing the chips back here, and billions of dollars. But it's sort of scattered. The bigger news is we're all building these AI factories, which is great. But if you look at those big seven companies, they're spending $50-60 billion annual to invest. And I think if you think from a sovereign point of view, you might be overspending. Do you need 6 times that much spend when China probably is going to spend 1 or 2 times that? That's like $300-400 billion difference. And where are they putting that money? The intelligent product factories.
It's crazy. I heard a stat recently that AI spending, investment in AI has surpassed consumer spending that, in the U.S. contributing to GDP growth.
Yeah.
That's just like an insane amount of investment in AI.
And that's my point. It's a little bit over-indexed on building these hyperscalers.
Let's shift gears a little bit and maybe talk about electric cars. Ford has taken a really interesting approach to EVs. The F-150 Lightning in particular, I think it's big. There was risk and a lot of investment, and I see a lot of them on the road. I have friends who own them, and
cool.
They love them.
Yeah.
But we're also seeing that the adoption rate has slowed and not been quite as intense as we expected. And there's been a lot of change politically in the United States, just kind of general cultural shift as well. What's the state of EVs in the U.S. and maybe globally, if you have that perspective?
It's what we call the early majority blues. There's an early adopter leading indicator and excitement. And then there's what I call the early majority blues. And it comes in few factors. One is, average electric vehicles still tend to be expensive. Getting that battery cost makes, it's a difference. Getting that range is important. So and some of this is, due to, again, how we get our parts, right? But that's why we did a hard pivot about a year ago. We loaded a whole bunch of EV that were highly priced and potentially harder on how we earn, revenue off of that, net revenue. So we decided, and seeing how the environment was changing, we pivoted away we unloaded them and instead changed our strategy to load more affordable EV platform from ground up. So that's where we focused our attention to, seeing where the China was going. So we wanted to make sure we were fit in competing against an affordable EV. And we tweaked our battery technology at the same time to something that is less dense, less flammable. It means it might not have as much range, but you can design that into the aerodynamics of the car to make sure you get the right range. So we've been very smart in my mind about pivoting. And then because we have multi-propulsion portfolio, we are turning a lot more of PHEV hybrids around, because even those big trucks, they love having power on board, especially when there are, we have a lot of, we serve a lot of essential workers who do a lot of, building and fixing and moving. So they need the range, but, they also don't mind getting that extra efficiency, in cities and urban areas, but also to power their work, which is something that they really love about lightning, of course, right? That thing
Yeah,
can
you
power
get
many
like a
things.
220, you get
Exactly.
bidirectional charging for
Yeah,
your house. Like
yeah,
it's an amazing vehicle, like the
yeah,
what it can do.
yeah. And so I think that shift is good for us. There's an analogy I like to give. So, in strategy, people like to draw S curves, you know, an S curve, you look at the climb, you're kind of blind to how short it is or how long you'll last. And then, you can draw a double S curve to show disruption. But then it's hard to understand the disruption. What most humans do is they look at, I've heard this term before, it's not mine, local to global maximum. And it's like, think of it as two hills. You're on a small hill, you see a bigger hill. Of course, that's where you want to go. And it's a very first person perspective. But in reality, when you turn it around into a third person view, you see the small hill and then you see a big valley. And then you get to the top of the hill. And so EV journey is just that. We're going through that valley, but in our mind, we have made the right strategic call to unload some of the EVs that we didn't think would be profitable and really double down on affordability that we think would be a better fit for our customer and making sure technology, the way we manufacture things, the battery we use is super efficient to give us that right viability, if you will. And then, we're not talking about other OEMs, but you'll notice that some of the OEMs they've already loaded their plan with some of these EVs that they can't unwind. That's kind of that's not a good place to be. Yeah.
Design Better is supported by Masterclass. My wife gives me a hard time because I fall into rabbit holes often. I'm curious about the world and I'm in a perpetual pursuit of knowledge. What can I say? I could spend hours doom scrolling or getting lost in Instagram, but I know that won't make me a better person. Instead, what I do is I pop open Masterclass on my phone and I dive into an enriching topic, like how to eat better, which is taught by Michael Pollan. He's one of my favorite authors. And Nobel laureate Paul Krugman has a masterclass on economics that I can jump into. Or I can learn about writing from Margaret Atwood, graphic design from David Carson, photography from Annie Leibovitz, or documentary filmmaking from Ken Burns. Now, that's a great use of my time and attention. And I think it's a great use of your attention, too. Whether you want to learn to write better, improve your public speaking, enhance your creativity, or become a better cook, hey, Masterclass has in-depth expertise that you can tap into anytime and any place. You can access Masterclass on your phone, your computer, your tablet, smart TV, or even in audio mode. You can listen to these classes. And right now, Design Better listeners get an additional 15% off an annual membership at masterclass.com/designbetter. That's 15% off at masterclass.com/designbetter.
One thing that's interesting to me about the design problems that you all face is that in most industrial design products, you design a product, you've learned from a customer, you sort of dial that in, you make that thing and you distribute it. But trucks in particular, and the Ford F-150 has been the most popular vehicle in the United States, not just the most popular truck, but the most popular vehicle since the 80s. I live in Georgia. They are ubiquitous. They're everywhere. And this product segment has a different type of design problem in that a lot of people want to customize their truck. So they get one from the dealership, and now dealerships are building in these like elaborate customization arms. So you just bought this brand new truck, you send it over to this other arm, they change the wheels, the bed, like lift kits, all kinds of different things you're getting. And electric vehicles, which seem to be inevitable and superior in many respects, they are not yet in that space where they can be quite so customized, because when you make all these customizations, it affects the software, the way that the whole thing fits together. Is this part of the design challenge that you and your team are working on?
Yeah, I would say, if I could abstract it a little bit, we sort of classify our company as a middleweight. We're not as big as, let's say, Toyota. So we have a very structured portfolio. I think the company for a while worked on trimming down unnecessary products. Like we had performance product, we had working products, we have adventure products, maybe family, so it's pretty tight. And even there, though, what's music to my ear is the way we're approaching software is from platform first point of view, so we can scale. And so we have this 80/20 rule about like how do we build this new OS that can serve all the portfolio, millions of vehicles, and then still find that uniqueness that makes each vehicle or each domain special. And it's a bit of it's fun and at the same time very challenging, to be honest, because like, for example, another thing we work together with our studio team is what we call cabin control strategy. And of course, truck customers probably want different kinds of interface than a family SUV. So, but we want to make sure we don't create the complexity that hurts us later with quality. Because at some point, the sheer scale of complexity it will make us be less efficient on how we build and update our products. And because we're also probably spending more time servicing the variations, right? So it's not any different than, even software companies have to manage this stuff. So we try to bridge that fine line of being platform centric, but not be tone deaf to the programs.
What do you think design is going to be in the next 5 years? I mean, there's so much right now. We're recording this a day after GPT-5 came out, and that's already I can see like some of the early demos.
Sure.
That's just going to change design dramatically and engineering.
Yes.
And when we project this out, I do a lot of reading and watching of YouTube with folks like Jeffrey Hinton, Mo Gaudat, all these folks who have been pioneers in AI and products in that space. And they're all projecting like very short periods of time, dramatic change. And I can't help but think it's all going to be different for us. How do you see it?
Well, yes, I think the sheer rate of growth is overwhelming. And I don't listen to people go, everything's going to be okay. They're the people who are looking at the beach, people on the beach, and not looking at the big wave coming behind them. And I think we should embrace the uncomfortableness, back to that valley. And I think our job as design is to figure out what part of that valley do we feel uncomfortable about and what's actionable. And so from interface point of view, there are a couple of things that I think is really interesting. I did mention one of this concept at the config panel, but it's this idea of like before sort of the generative AI, our input method was all about us pushing it in. It's very instructional, right? So if you want to design a chair, you use a mouse and you're inputting and you're instructing basically. That's the interface. With AI, especially when it's generative, you're pulling. You can say, let there be a chair. You're asking a question first. It's very Socratic. So we can talk about that too. Then you're refining that idea. So from a design process, that's why I keep saying, I don't think we have to write interface for it because the folks who are creating these large capabilities, it doesn't come with new interface. So everyone's struggling. And that's why everyone's trying to design a new browser. And, like I literally, had this talk a couple of weeks before Johnny and Sam got together. I'm not saying I predicted it, but like, I think it's in the air. And in the talk, I was saying, don't make fun of rabbits and human AI pins. There's going to be more of them. We're just trying to figure out what that interface is, right? So I think that's at one level. At a working level, you know how we use diamonds a lot to talk about diverge and converge? And I've been around the block. Most companies, they don't have the left side of the diamond. They're just converging. How many places have you been where you're just converging? Here are the KPIs, converge, right? And so the design job is to create the runway to go, no, you want to have insights. You want to be stimulated by our prototypes. There's that kind of gray area that can really drive the direction and points of view. And especially on V1 products, like at Amazon, it was perfect environment where design could go show that hand more. But when you're in a very operational place, it's a little bit harder, right? But most places, they tend to start at the top of that peak of that diamond and they never see the left side. I think with AI, if you kind of entertain this idea of that, hey, we can bring the Socratic model back, what that means is you don't start with the what, you start with the question. And then you can actually frame it. It's very design friendly, right? And if you look at your own workflows on how you use these LLMs, at least this is the way I do it. It's very Socratic. I ask questions, questions, and I generate different options and we debate, and then I have it summarize it for me, you know? And you don't want to get into paralysis of this, but it's a very interesting partnership that I'm finding that you can apply, that I've been doing it with AI to do as a design leader in companies, right? Like when someone gives you a PRD, I always go, you wrote about the how, or I actually inspect. I shouldn't say everyone does it. I inspect, was the paper written about the why and what or the how? And it's going to be a distribution of some, right? But usually if it's very weighted on the how, which is typical, I go, no, that's our job. Let's define the why and what. And we can help you with that. We can give you research, we can prototype, we can ideate. It will help your output be better. And then let us design, that's the help part. But it's always, it doesn't come for free. I haven't been to any place that is part of the culture. You kind of have to establish it. So I think AI in 5 years, well, 5 years is a long time, but I think those are some of the things that we can do. The challenge with exponential growth is also the rate of how different class of workers would get displaced. If you think about kind of peak factory era to peak first office and then peak office with PC, you can see a displacement and distribution of the workforce from like, I think farming now is like less than 2%, but it used to be, 60, 70%, pre-industrial. And then was majority was factory, and then the office worker were more clerks. So I've been trying to figure out like, okay, where do these people go? Like, because like at first you go, oh, there may be no jobs, but like every time there's a disruption, we did create new places where people did work. And I'm just trying to figure out what that looks like. And it's possible that most people are going to a larger bucket of essential work, whether service, hospitality. But this is sort of like if you assume a steady projection of AI and robotics, like I think, you kind of have to take I think in 5 years, I think that's chapter one of displacement, and probably another 10, 15 years for chapter 2 and 3. I don't know.
Design Better is supported by Miro. I've been in more meetings than I can count where I walked away feeling like we didn't solve the problem that we needed to. And guess what that means? More meetings. There should be a better way for people to collaborate and work through ideas together. Turns out there is. Miro's Innovation Workspace is an intelligent platform that brings people into a shared space to do their best work. I've used Miro to run workshops and design sprints with product designers around the world. And I've watched design and marketing teams work together to turn rough ideas into concrete plans in short meetings. Miro AI can turn unstructured data like sticky notes or screenshots into usable diagrams, product briefs, data tables, and prototypes in minutes. It just accelerates everything. And you can also generate roadmaps and diagrams, tables, content, and more with Miro AI, dropping it all into a collaborative canvas. People who are afraid to draw feel comfortable in Miro because they can write notes, they can give feedback, and communicate their ideas with the easy-to-use tools built in. Help your teams get great work done with Miro. Check out Miro.com to find out how. That's Miro.com, Miro.com.
You talked about the diamond and the divergent phase of design, and it seems like we're in a space where these AI tools make that so much more accessible and fast to iterate and create prototypes and explore different. Maybe talk a little bit about that, how that's, you've seen that applying even now in your own team.
I have like mixed feeling about it, to be honest. There are tools now where you don't have to draw, right? So your question could be a sketch. I call the input a question now, in the AI, and then boom, it will render things for you. And I ask myself, as a designer or as a human, what happened to the art of approaching a blank canvas? How fast do you want things to come to you? It's something that I just question. Like there's something good about the slowness of things, I don't know if you've ever read Milan Kundera's, he's known for writing a book called Unbearable Lightness of Being. He's a philosopher. But then he wrote a book called Slowness. And it's a really cool book because the first chapter is all about these two people, men and women. They're on a carriage going down a countryside. It's a long ride. And he talks about how just them inadvertently bumping into each other creates emotions. So like we've lost that part of creation if we just go too fast. And I'm trying to figure out what is that version. But other than that, because like right now, I feel like everything we talk about is fast speed, velocity. It's almost like microwaving your way into production. And I'm like, okay, maybe you can do it with ads, but it's not how you really want to live. Like, I don't know. But I think when you're moving things at scale, of course, it's a huge. I mean, people were talking about Microsoft Office as digital human lifts, right? And so this is that times a lot more. And so I think you can leverage it. I think the collateral damage is we're gonna need less humans. It's just like, I mean, that's just the reality.
And the rise of robotics is part of this as well. It's reported, but maybe it's not quite as in focus. There's amazing stuff happening with robotics right now that will converge with AI that's happening. I mean, it's sort of this perfect storm of things that will change our culture, potentially impacts capitalism in major ways. I mean, what you just described was about 10 to 15% of the American population being displaced by AI one way or another. And when the robotic revolution hits as well, when those things combine, that could be considerably higher.
Very much. And in fact, that's what I was trying to express at the config. It's just underreported. You might hear about figure and stuff like that, right? But what's underreported is if you look at, again, back to China, they have an existential crisis. Actually, in general, world is aging and we're not replicating as fast. But China, remember, they had a one-child policy. So that is a huge one-way door that's costing them probably 80 million labor force in the next 20 years. So they're moving straight into humanoid robotics using their EV platform. And that's what I mean about having being fit on core industry in industrial core. They have it, they're shifting it over, and you're gonna like Xiaomi phones are run on a dark factory. They make one every 5 seconds.
Yeah.
So
no lights on, no humans.
No,
That's what you mean by a dark factory. Like
yes.
It's just like production happening and there's nobody there.
Yeah, and then so what you're going to move is from human supervised humanoids to system supervised humanoids very quickly. And again, they're going to have access power supply, and they have integrate all their supply chains. So that's a pretty mighty leverage to have in the world geopolitics or geoeconomics. And in the US, I feel like individual companies isn't going to scale. You need like a national plan. You're not going to secure enough supply to get the cost down. If you study the drone industry, this is what happened. I forget the manufacturer here, but like they couldn't compete against China. They were distributed location, didn't have the supply under control, and China just out-muscled them and out-innovated them.
Are you describing basically like a government-based operations to supply companies, or do you mean like...
Yeah, it's an open question. Like, again, back to the valley between the local and global maximus. Yeah. I think of like, I'm not a politician, so don't get me wrong, but like, why are there tariffs? Well, we are $2 trillion. There's a $2 trillion gap between US and China, which is outputting less. Plain and simple. But it's kind of our system, globalism, right? And then you've got, you need policies. We got AI Act, we got CHIP Act. You need policies to try to drive some of that. But then we need to do more, I think. Like, we have to figure out. And again, I haven't architected this, so don't get me the wrong way, but like, I think we have to start thinking about this in terms of like, well, what is the pan company level? How do you do this? How do the OEMs all get together to secure supply together? Like, you need scale.
Yeah.
You can't do this as a startup alone.
You alluded to something that I think is very important for designers to start thinking about, which is that, we're moving into AI. AI is kind of the rethinking of everything that we do as designers in many ways. And yet we're still operating with kind of antiquated UI models.
Yeah.
There's a long history of this as media evolves, that it sort of imitates what was before until it can figure out its own identity. One small example is, I remember in the late 90s, CD-ROMs and even websites would design books. Like this was a metaphor that people often use, like you're clicking through from book to book. HyperCard was sort of like that as well, like you're jumping from place to place. And we're still operating with like click and tap. Natural user interfaces seem inevitable with AI. What do you and your team, what are you experimenting with, or how are you thinking about a different opportunity for interacting with computers?
I won't give away what exactly we're doing, but I can tell you we've been starting to look around the corner. I'm not saying I'm not a futurist, but like I'm practical. But I wanted to figure out, okay, like especially in Ford, we have core demographics that work in a certain way, our customer base. So it's very hard to defy that gravity, if you will. It takes a lot of energy to pull off of that gravity, to think a little bit differently. But one provocation that I provided to the team was I was just charting, different evolution of things, but including generational. And if you think about Gen Alpha, they are AI native. They know what an agent is in elementary school. That is a scary thought. I had Gen Zs. They knew that there was a service for that, like Instagram and stuff like that. Maybe they're middle school and high school, depending on how old your Gen Zs are. And millennials, of course, there's an app for that, and maybe high school or college. I'm a Gen X, and I knew there was a computer for writing a doc in college. So you can see how and I learned back to be a digital native, right? Because those things came to have a whole generation that is accustomed to knowing there's a AI for that. You really have to take first principles approach to what an in-cabin experience is, what a vehicle is even, because by then you're going to have quite a bit of interesting products out there. Not all of them will make it, but some of them might become the next, ubiquitous thing. We just don't know.
Jae, this has been a fascinating conversation. What's inspiring you right now? And it doesn't have to be work related. Before we started the interview, you and Aaron were riffing on your guitars in the background there. Is there anything in your music world, in the movies you've been watching or TV shows or anything you've been reading that you've been find particularly inspiring?
I'm finding actually the basics is what's most inspiring. I tend to go down rabbit holes. Curiosity takes me to a lot of places, but at the end of the day, I'm realizing spending more time with your loved ones is what's inspiring and wanting to do more of that. It's really that simple, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I love my walks. I'm in the Bay Area, so there's a place called Fort Funston. It's a beach, it's got trails. I just love going there. My kids are also at home. And so there's that intersection, like they sort of came back for a little period of time. So I'm trying to enjoy that time before they move out again.
That's great.
Yeah.
Where can people learn more about you and the work that you and your team are doing at Ford?
I don't keep a big profile. So like at LinkedIn, I have some links to some talks. Hopefully maybe this interview also helped. And we are working on like a Ford design website. We don't have one, to be honest. Last 3 years, we've been busy building the next gen work, but it's not coming out yet. When some of those vehicles are more mature, then we can start talking about it. That's, I think, we'll roll out more about our team, how we work, our story, the design language, all that fun stuff that we definitely want to share.
That's great.
Well, Jae, thank you so much for joining us on Design Better. This has been super interesting.
Thank you for having me.